The Florida sun beat down mercilessly on the rental car's windshield as Agnes Harper pulled into her son's driveway, the familiar weight of anticipation settling in her chest like a stone. At 68, she'd learned to temper her expectations. But Thanksgiving still held that stubborn shimmer of hope, the promise of warmth, laughter, and the kind of family closeness that seemed to exist only in her memory these days. Kyle's house stood before her like a monument to modern success. Pristine white stucco, manicured lawn, and a 3-car garage that probably cost more than the entire house she'd raised him in back in Ohio. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The humid air of Willow Creek pressed in on Agnes, a familiar embrace she hadn't felt in months. Her vintage Ford pickup, usually a beacon of her independent spirit, felt like a borrowed shell after the long drive from the coast. Agnes, a woman whose hands usually smelled of antique polish and the faint scent of old paper, now carried the lingering, almost clinical aroma of hospital soap. 6 months, 6 long, arduous months, battling a stubborn, insidious pneumonia that had threatened to extinguish her flame entirely. But Agnes, at 72, was no stranger to stubbornness. She had faced down recalcitrant auctioneers, outbid aggressive collectors, and navigated the labyrinthine world of rare finds with a quiet tenacity that belied her gentle demeanor. Her antique shop, Agnes's Curiosities, nestled on the quaint cobblestone main street of Willow Creek, was more than just a business. It was the culmination of her life's passion, a repository of forgotten stories, each dusty object whispering tales of bygone eras. It was her legacy, her sanctuary, her very breath. As she turned the corner onto Main Street, a knot of anticipation, mixed with a strange, almost premonitory unease, tightened in her stomach. The familiar storefronts, the scent of fresh-baked bread from the bakery next door, the distant chime of the clock tower. It was all there, just as she'd left it. But then her gaze landed on her own shop, a jarring splash of newness against the aged brick. The old, ornate brass lock, a fixture since she'd opened her doors 30 years ago, was gone. In its place, a gleaming, modern silver padlock, stark and unwelcoming. Her heart, which had just recently steadied its rhythm after months of erratic beats, gave a painful lurch. This wasn't right. This wasn't her lock. A figure emerged from inside the shop, silhouetted against the dim interior. It was her nephew, Leo, followed closely by his wife, Clara. Leo, with his slicked-back hair and an air of self-importance that had only grown since he'd started working for her 5 years ago, a favor she'd extended out of familial obligation after his last failed venture. Clara, always impeccably dressed, her sharp features perpetually set in an expression of thinly veiled ambition. They were supposed to be looking after the shop, managing it in her absence, but this felt less like management and more like takeover. Agnes parked her truck, the familiar rumble of the engine doing little to calm the tremor in her hands. She stepped out, her movements still a little stiff, a physical reminder of the battle she'd just won. The sun caught the new lock, making it glint almost mockingly. "Leo, Clara." Her voice, a little hoarse from disuse, sounded alien in the quiet afternoon. They both turned, their faces a mixture of surprise and something that looked suspiciously like annoyance. Leo's practiced smile, usually reserved for potential customers, faltered. Clara's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose, a silent question hanging in the air. "Aunt Agnes!" Leo exclaimed, recovering quickly, though his voice held a strained artificial cheer. "You're back! What a surprise!" "Indeed," Agnes replied, her gaze unwavering as it flickered from the new lock to their faces. "A surprise for us all, it seems. What's happened to the lock, Leo?" Leo ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit she knew well. "Oh, that? Yes, well, it's a long story, Aunt Agnes. You see, after you got sick, we had a bit of a security issue. A break-in attempt, actually. Nothing serious, mind you, but we thought it best to upgrade. For safety, you know." He gestured vaguely towards the street, as if a gang of phantom burglars lurked in the shadows. Clara stepped forward, her smile as brittle as antique porcelain. "It was really for the best, Agnes. We couldn't risk anything happening to your precious inventory while you were indisposed. We've been working tirelessly, keeping everything running smoothly. It's been quite the challenge, but we managed." Her tone was laced with a self-congratulatory air that grated on Agnes's nerves. Managed, indeed. Managed to change the locks on her own shop without a single call, a single consultation. "Indisposed," Agnes repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "Is that what you call it, Clara? A life-threatening illness that kept me away from my home and my livelihood for half a year?" She saw a flicker of discomfort in Clara's eyes, quickly masked. "Of course not, Agnes," Clara said, her voice softening, though the sincerity didn't quite reach her eyes. "We were just so worried about you. We didn't want to bother you with trivialities while you were recovering." Trivialities. The ownership of her life's work. The very keys to her independence. Agnes felt a familiar, quiet anger begin to simmer beneath her calm exterior. They truly believed she was out of the picture. Perhaps even permanently. They saw her illness not as a battle she'd fought and won, but as an opportunity, a convenient removal of the old guard. "And who exactly has the new keys?" Agnes asked, her voice deceptively mild. Leo's eyes darted to Clara, a silent communication passing between them. "Well, we do, of course, Aunt Agnes," Leo said, puffing out his chest slightly. "We've been handling everything. All the sales, the inventory, the new acquisitions. It's been quite profitable, actually. More so than usual, I might add." He winked, as if sharing a secret triumph, a testament to their superior business acumen. Agnes looked at her shop, the new lock, and then back at her nephew and his wife. They stood there, radiating a smug satisfaction, completely oblivious to the quiet revolution that had been unfolding in her life while she lay in a hospital bed. They thought they had seized control, that her absence had been their gain. But Agnes Harper had always been a few steps ahead, even when her body was failing her. While they were busy changing locks, she had been busy signing papers. Papers that transferred ownership of Agnes's curiosities to a new, unexpected proprietor. A proprietor who, at this very moment, was standing just a few feet away, observing the scene with an unnervingly calm gaze. The man, whom Agnes had noticed moments before, was tall and lean, with silvering temples and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had been standing near the bakery, ostensibly admiring the display, but his attention was clearly fixed on her shop and the unfolding drama. He wore a simple, well-tailored suit and carried a briefcase that looked more like a piece of art than a functional accessory. He wasn't a local, she was sure of it. His presence, initially a mere observation, now felt like a silent, powerful counterpoint to Leo and Clara's bluster. They were so consumed by their perceived victory, their self-importance, that they hadn't even registered his presence, let alone the significance of it. Agnes felt a small, secret smile play on her lips. The twist, she thought, was going to be delicious. The sun continued to beat down, but Agnes felt a sudden chill, a premonition of the storm that was about to break. It wasn't the chill of fear, but of anticipation. She had faced down worse storms than this, both literal and metaphorical, and this time she held the most potent weapon of all, a secret. A secret that would unravel their carefully constructed narrative of control and expose their true colors for all to see. The new lock, meant to keep her out, would soon become a symbol of their own unwitting entrapment. "Well, that's certainly efficient," Agnes said, her voice still mild, though a steely glint had entered her eyes. She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against the cold, impersonal metal of the new padlock. It felt alien, a violation of the shop's very essence. The old lock, with its intricate carvings and worn patina, had been a testament to time, to endurance. This new one spoke only of exclusion. Leo, emboldened by her apparent calm, puffed out his chest a little further. We had to be, Aunt Agnes. The market's tough, you know. And with you, well, out of commission, we couldn't afford any missteps. Clara's been a godsend, really. She's got a real head for business, much more so than I ever gave her credit for. He shot Clara a saccharine smile, which she returned with a triumphant smirk. Clara, sensing an opportunity to further assert her dominance, stepped closer. We've made some changes, Agnes. Streamlined a few things. Got rid of some of the clutter. You know, those dusty old boxes of things that never sold. We've focused on higher value items, things that move quickly. It's all about maximizing profit in this economy, isn't it? Her gaze swept over Agnes, lingering for a moment on her slightly too large clothes, a subtle jab at her recent illness and perceived weakness. Agnes felt a familiar ache in her chest, not from her recovering lungs, but from the casual dismissal of her life's work. Clutter, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Those dusty old boxes held memories, stories, potential. They were the heart of her shop, the very reason Agnes's Curiosities was unique. It wasn't just about profit, it was about preservation, about finding beauty in the forgotten. They saw only numbers, not narratives. Yes, well, you know, Leo interjected, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden shift in Agnes's demeanor. We just wanted to make sure everything was in tip-top shape for your return, Aunt Agnes. Whenever that might be, of course. We weren't sure, given your condition. His voice trailed off, a thinly veiled implication of her near demise hanging in the air. Agnes met his gaze directly. My condition, Leo, is vastly improved. In fact, I've been quite busy during my recovery, attending to certain matters. She paused, letting the ambiguity hang. Her eyes flickered towards the man still standing by the bakery, who had now subtly shifted his weight, his attention unwavering. He caught her gaze for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before he looked away, seemingly absorbed by a particularly crusty baguette. Clara, however, was not so easily deterred. Busy? Oh, Agnes, you shouldn't have overexerted yourself. Rest was paramount. We've handled everything here. You can just relax, take it easy. We've even considered expanding, perhaps opening a second location. A chain, you know. Agnes's Curiosities and more. What do you think? Her tone was patronizing, as if discussing a child's fanciful dream. The implication was clear. Agnes was old, frail, and her ideas were outdated. They were the future, ready to take her quaint little shop and transform it into a modern, profitable enterprise, with or without her input. A chain, Agnes mused, a faint smile touching her lips. How? Ambitious. And who exactly would be funding this expansion, Clara? Clara laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound. Oh, we have our ways. We've been cultivating some very important connections. Investors who see the potential, unlike some who are stuck in the past. She glanced pointedly at Agnes, then back at Leo, as if sharing a private joke. Agnes's smile widened, a genuine, unforced expression that surprised them both. Indeed. The past can be a very valuable thing, Clara. Sometimes it holds more secrets than the future. She took a step closer to the shop door, her hand still resting on the new lock. So you've been managing everything then? All the finances, all the sales, all the acquisitions? Every single thing, Aunt Agnes, Leo affirmed, swelling with pride. We've been meticulous, every penny accounted for. We even had to put a few of your less profitable items on consignment, just to clear space, you understand. Consignment, Agnes repeated, her voice flat. She knew exactly what less profitable items meant to them. Anything that didn't fetch a quick, substantial return. The unique, the obscure, the truly curious pieces that were the soul of her collection. The ones that took time to find the right buyer, but ultimately brought the most satisfaction. Yes, well, Clara interjected, sensing a shift in the conversation that she didn't like. We've been very careful with your assets, Agnes. We know how much this shop means to you. It's practically your child, isn't it? The word child was delivered with a subtle sneer, a reminder of Agnes's childless state. A common, cruel jab from Clara over the years. Agnes felt the sting, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of quiet power. They were so focused on their petty slights, their assumed victory, that they were completely blind to the larger game at play. It is, Agnes agreed, her voice regaining its strength. And like any parent, I've had to make some very difficult decisions for its future. Decisions that were made with its best interests at heart, even if they seemed unconventional at the time. Her gaze drifted back to the man by the bakery, who had now picked up a newspaper and was pretending to read it, though Agnes knew his ears were still keenly attuned to their conversation. Leo and Clara exchanged a quick, confused glance. "Unconventional?" Leo asked, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, Aunt Agnes?" "Oh, just that sometimes, when you're facing a significant challenge," Agnes said, her voice rising slightly, carrying just enough to reach the man by the bakery. "You have to think outside the box. You have to consider all your options, even the ones that seem drastic, especially when you're not sure if you'll even be around to make those decisions yourself." She let the implication of her illness hang in the air, a subtle manipulation of their guilt, a prelude to the coming revelation. Clara, ever the pragmatist, narrowed her eyes. "What kind of drastic options, Agnes? Are you talking about selling off more inventory? Because we've already done a thorough assessment, and honestly, there's not much left that would fetch a decent price without significant restoration." Agnes chuckled, a low, throaty sound that held no humor. "Oh, Clara, you always think so small. Inventory is just a small piece of the puzzle. Sometimes it's the entire puzzle you have to consider. The whole picture." She gestured expansively towards the shop, encompassing not just the building but the land, the business, the very name. Leo, finally catching a whiff of something unsettling, stepped forward. "Aunt Agnes, what exactly are you implying? Are you saying you've done something without telling us?" His voice was laced with a sudden, anxious suspicion. The smugness was beginning to crack. "Implying, Leo?" Agnes raised an eyebrow, her gaze unwavering. "I'm simply stating that a wise person, when faced with uncertainty, secures their future. And sometimes, securing your future means letting go of the past in order to embrace a new beginning, especially when you have unexpected help." Her eyes flickered once more to the man by the bakery, who, at that very moment, folded his newspaper with a crisp, decisive snap and began to walk slowly towards them. Leo and Clara, caught in the sudden shift of Agnes's tone and the unsettling approach of the stranger, turned to face him. Their expressions were a mixture of confusion and mild irritation, as if an unwanted interruption had just entered their carefully choreographed scene. They still saw him as an outsider, a mere passerby. They had no idea he was about to become the central figure in their unraveling. Agnes felt a thrill of anticipation. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on a revelation they would never forget. The subtle dance was over. The direct confrontation was about to begin. The man from the bakery approached with a measured, unhurried gait, his eyes, calm and observant, taking in the scene before him. Leo and Clara, flustered by his unexpected presence, shifted uncomfortably. They still hadn't connected the dots, still hadn't recognized the quiet authority in his bearing. They merely saw an interruption, a potential customer perhaps, or a curious bystander. "Can we help you?" Clara asked, her voice regaining a hint of its usual crispness, though tinged with impatience. She clearly wanted this awkward conversation with Agnes to end. The man stopped a few feet from them, his gaze settling on Agnes. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "I believe I can help all of you," he said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying a quiet power that cut through the tension. "My name is Mr. Alistair Finch, and I believe we have some business to discuss." Leo and Clara exchanged another bewildered glance. "Business?" Leo repeated, his voice laced with suspicion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Finch, but I don't believe we have any business with you. This is a private matter." He gestured dismissively towards Agnes, as if she were the source of all their current inconvenience. Alistair Finch's smile widened slightly, a knowing glint in his eyes. On the contrary, young man, I assure you we have very significant business, especially concerning this establishment. He gestured towards Agnes's curiosities, his gaze lingering on the new padlock. Clara scoffed. With all due respect, Mr. Finch, this is our shop. My husband and I are currently managing it for our aunt, Agnes here, who has been unwell. We're not looking for any outside investment or unsolicited advice. Her tone was dismissive, condescending, as if she were dealing with a persistent salesman. Agnes watched, a quiet satisfaction blossoming in her chest. They were so utterly, completely oblivious. Their arrogance was a thick, impenetrable shield, preventing them from seeing the truth that was now standing directly in front of them. "Clara, Leo," Agnes interjected, her voice clear and strong, cutting through their bluster. "Perhaps you should listen to Mr. Finch. He has a very important role to play in the future of this shop, more important, perhaps, than you realize." Leo's face flushed. "Aunt Agnes, please. We're trying to handle this. You're just back. You're still recovering. Let us deal with this, gentlemen." He turned back to Alistair Finch, a forced politeness in his voice. "Look, sir, we appreciate your interest, but we're quite capable of running this business on our own. We've been doing it successfully for months." "Successfully indeed," Alistair Finch murmured, his eyes twinkling. He then turned his full attention to Agnes, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "Agnes, are you ready to clarify matters?" Agnes nodded, a profound sense of calm settling over her. This was it, the moment she had planned for, waited for, through weeks of pain and uncertainty. "I am Mr. Finch." "Leo, Clara," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "While I was recovering, I had a lot of time to think about the future of my shop, about my own future, and I decided that it was time for a change, a significant change." Clara's eyes narrowed. "What kind of change, Agnes? Are you finally going to retire? Because we've been telling you for years that you should take it easy. Let us take over completely." Her voice was laced with a triumphant edge, as if Agnes were finally admitting defeat. "Retire?" Agnes chuckled, a genuine, mirthful sound this time. "Something like that, Clara. But not in the way you imagine. You see, while you two were busy changing locks and streamlining my beloved collection, I was busy making sure that Agnes's curiosities would continue to thrive, even without me at the helm." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, watching their faces for the dawning comprehension. Leo's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about, Aunt Agnes? What could you possibly have done from a hospital bed?" "Oh, quite a lot, Leo," Agnes replied, her gaze unwavering. "I sold the shop." The words landed like a bombshell. Leo's jaw dropped, his face draining of color. Clara's eyes widened, her carefully constructed composure shattering. You sold it?" Clara stammered, her voice a disbelieving whisper. "Without telling us? Without consulting us? After all we've done to keep it afloat?" Her voice rose, indignation warring with shock. "Indeed," Agnes said, a quiet triumph in her voice. "I sold it to a man who understands the true value of this place, not just its monetary worth. A man who appreciates history and who respects the legacy I've built here." She turned, a graceful, deliberate movement, and gestured towards Alistair Finch. "To Mr. Alistair Finch." Leo and Clara's heads snapped towards Alistair, their eyes wide with a dawning, horrified realization. The man they had dismissed, the man who had been standing silently behind them, was not a curious bystander or an annoying salesman. He was the new owner. The man to whom Agnes had secretly transferred her life's work. The man whose authority they had just so blithely disregarded. Titoweses. Alistair Finch stepped forward, his expression now completely devoid of amusement, replaced by a calm, unwavering resolve. He extended a hand towards the new padlock. "Yes," he said, his voice resonating with quiet power. "I am the new owner. And as for these rather unnecessary additions," he tapped the padlock, "I believe they can be removed now. I have the proper keys." He pulled a small, elegant key ring from his pocket, a single gleaming key dangling from it. It was a key to the new lock. Leo stared at the key, then at Agnes, then back at Alistair, his face a mask of utter disbelief and growing panic. But how? When? He stammered, his voice cracking. We were managing everything. We had power of attorney. You couldn't have done this. Oh, but I could, Leo, Agnes said, her voice now firm, leaving no room for argument. My power of attorney was for medical decisions, and for the temporary management of the shop's day-to-day operations during my illness. It did not, and never would, grant you the right to sell my property, or to make unilateral decisions about its future. And as for when, let's just say that while you were busy counting pennies and dismissing my clutter, I was busy securing the future of this establishment with someone who truly values it. Clara, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and humiliation, pointed a trembling finger at Agnes. This is spite. You're doing this out of spite. After all we did for you, looking after your shop, making sure it didn't fall apart while you were incapacitated. Agnes met Clara's furious gaze without flinching. Spite, Clara? No, this is self-preservation. This is a woman finally understanding that her life's work and her own dignity are worth protecting. And as for what you did for me, let's be clear, you saw an opportunity, and you took it. You changed the locks on my shop, thinking I was out of the picture, not knowing I'd already sold it to the man standing behind you. Alistair Finch stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Indeed, and I must say, your management style has been quite illuminating. I've been observing for some time the unauthorized changes to inventory, the disrespectful attitude towards Agnes, the blatant disregard for her wishes. It's all been noted. His voice was calm, but the underlying steel was unmistakable. Leo's face was ashen. Observing? What do you mean, observing? Let's just say, Alistair replied, a chillingly polite tone in his voice, that when one acquires a valuable asset, one does their due diligence. And that includes understanding the current operational environment, including the people who believe they are in control. He then turned to Agnes, his expression softening. Agnes, if you would do the honors. He held out the key. Agnes took the key, the cold metal feeling like a symbol of her reclaimed power. She looked at Leo and Clara, their faces a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning fear. They had believed themselves untouchable, the rightful inheritors of her legacy. They had underestimated her, dismissed her, and now they were facing the very consequences of their arrogance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Agnes inserted the key into the new padlock. With a satisfying click, the lock sprang open. She removed it, the gleaming silver a stark contrast to the familiar, welcoming darkness of her shop's interior. She held the padlock in her hand, a small, heavy piece of metal, a testament to their misguided attempt at control. This, she said, looking directly at Leo and Clara, is no longer yours to wield, and neither is this shop. She handed the padlock to Alistair Finch, a symbolic transfer of power. Alistair took the padlock, his eyes meeting Agnes's in a silent acknowledgement of their shared victory. He then turned to Leo and Clara, his expression firm. I believe you have some personal belongings inside. I suggest you retrieve them. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required. And any further attempts to interfere with the operations of this establishment will be met with appropriate legal action. His voice was calm, but the threat was clear and absolute. Leo and Clara stood frozen, their grand plans, their assumed inheritance, crumbling around them. The man they had ignored, the woman they had dismissed, had just orchestrated their complete downfall. The twist, as Agnes had known it would be, was utterly devastating. And for the first time in months, Agnes Harper felt truly, completely free. The silence that followed Alistair Finch's calm declaration was heavier than any words, suffocating Leo and Clara in its stark reality. Their faces, moments ago contorted with anger and self-righteousness, now sagged with a profound, almost comical sense of defeat. Leo, usually so quick with a slick explanation or a nervous laugh, was utterly speechless, his mouth agape like a landed fish. Clara, ever the more outwardly volatile, trembled with a suppressed fury that threatened to erupt, her perfect coiffure slightly askew from her earlier gesticulations. "Get out," Agnes stated, her voice devoid of emotion, a cool, crisp command that cut through the humid afternoon air. She stepped aside, making way for Alistair to unlock the glass entrance doors of Agnes's Curiosities. The familiar chime, usually a welcome sound, now echoed with a chilling finality. Leo finally found his voice, a high-pitched whine of disbelief. "Aunt Agnes, you can't be serious. This is insane. We're family. After everything we've done to keep this place running, to cover for you while you were..." He waved his hand vaguely, unable to bring himself to voice the word incapacitated again. "Family," Agnes scoffed, a single, sharp sound. Family doesn't change the locks on a sick relative's business without a single word. Family doesn't dismiss her life's work as, quote, clutter. Family doesn't plot to take over what isn't theirs. What you did, Leo, Clara, was not an act of family. It was an act of opportunism. And now the opportunity has passed. Clara, regaining some of her venom, hissed. "You'll regret this, Agnes. You'll be alone. Who's going to look after you when you're truly old and can't manage on your own? We were your only option." Alistair Finch, who had quietly stepped inside the shop, re-emerged, his expression unreadable. He held a small, leather-bound ledger in one hand. "On the contrary, Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice calm but firm, "Agnes has many options. And as for being alone, I assure you, she is far from it. Now, if you'll kindly collect your personal effects. I believe you have a coat, a handbag, and a rather conspicuous set of ledgers that seem to suggest a distinct lack of transparency in your accounting." He nodded towards the leather-bound book in his hand. Clara gasped, her eyes darting to the ledger, then back to Alistair with a terrified recognition. That's private. You have no right." "I have every right," Alistair corrected smoothly. "As the new proprietor, all records pertaining to the business are now my property. And I assure you, I have a team of auditors who will be very interested in reviewing your meticulous accounting." The quiet threat hung heavy in the air. Leo, seeing the full scope of their predicament, finally crumpled. "Clara, let's go. There's no point." His voice was defeated. All his bluster evaporated. He pushed past her and stumbled into the shop, his shoulders slumped. Clara, however, stood her ground for another furious moment, her eyes blazing at Agnes. "You think you've won, old woman? You've only isolated yourself. You're just a bitter, lonely old woman." With one last, hateful glare, she spun on her heel and stalked into the shop, the chime of the door a furious clang behind her. Agnes watched them go, a sigh escaping her lips. It wasn't a sigh of relief, not entirely. It was a sigh of weariness, the emotional fatigue that comes after a long, draining battle. The victory felt bittersweet. She hadn't truly wanted to hurt them, her own family. But they had forced her hand. They had left her no choice but to remind them, brutally, of her own worth and agency. Alistair returned a few minutes later, holding a small, nondescript cardboard box. "They're gone," he confirmed, his voice gentle. "I believe these are their remaining personal effects. They left in a rather hasty fashion." He smiled faintly. I imagine the thought of an audit was quite the motivator. Agnes managed a small, tired smile in return. "Thank you, Alistair, for everything, for being here." He nodded, his gaze compassionate. "It was part of the agreement, Agnes. To ensure a smooth transition. And to ensure you received the respect you deserved." He paused, then added, "It was quite a performance, though, the way you led them on. Most impressive." Agnes chuckled softly. "Years of haggling over dusty artifacts has taught me a thing or two about reading people. And about knowing when to reveal your true hand." She looked at her shop, the door now closed, the new padlock lying forgotten on the ground where Alistair had dropped it. "It's over, isn't it?" The initial skirmish, yes, Alistair confirmed. The real work begins now. For both of us. He stepped forward, picked up the padlock, and placed it carefully in the box with Leo and Clara's meager belongings. I'll ensure these are returned to them, with a clear message about future conduct. Agnes walked slowly towards the shop door, her hand reaching for the glass. It felt different now. No longer a fortress that had kept her out, but a gateway to a new beginning. She hadn't even truly processed the immense weight of the decision until this very moment. Selling Agnes's curiosities, her heart, her soul, her decades of dedication, had been a choice born of necessity and a deep-seated desire to protect her legacy from those who would exploit it. Her illness had been a harsh wake-up call. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, tethered to machines, her future uncertain, Agnes had realized that her life's work, her beloved shop, was vulnerable. Leo and Clara, with their constant subtle jabs and their transparent ambition, had been circling like vultures. She knew, deep down, that if anything truly happened to her, they would swoop in, strip the shop of its soul, and turn it into something unrecognizable, something cheap and commercial. The thought was unbearable. Hapsite. It was during one of her clearer moments, when the fog of medication had lifted, that the idea had come to her, not just to protect the shop, but to secure her own peace of mind. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to carve out her own path. And now, at 72, she was determined not to become a victim, not to be seen as frail or incapable. She had discreetly reached out to a trusted contact, an old friend from the antique circuit, who had put her in touch with Alistair Finch. Alistair Finch was not a typical real estate developer, nor a greedy corporate buyer. He was a quiet, astute collector in his own right, a patron of the arts with a passion for preserving historical establishments. He owned a small, highly specialized firm that acquired and meticulously restored unique properties, ensuring their character was maintained while giving them a new lease on life. He didn't just buy buildings, he bought stories. And he had been deeply impressed by Agnes's story, and by the soul she had poured into her shop. Their negotiations, conducted in hushed tones over crackling phone lines from her hospital room, had been surprisingly straightforward. Agnes hadn't just sold the brick and mortar, she had sold the essence of Agnes's curiosities, with a clause that ensured its name, its spirit, and much of its unique inventory would remain intact. She had insisted on the condition of anonymity until she was ready to return, allowing her to gauge Leo and Clara's true intentions without interference. The plan had been risky, unconventional, but it had worked perfectly. Now, standing at the threshold of her former shop, Agnes felt a strange mix of emptiness and exhilarating freedom. It was like shedding a heavy cloak she hadn't realized she was still wearing. The years of carrying the full burden of the shop, the responsibility, the endless search for unique pieces, the constant battle against dwindling foot traffic and the rising tide of mass-produced goods, it had all taken its toll even before the pneumonia. She had loved it, deeply. But love, she was learning, sometimes meant knowing when to let go. "What will you do now, Agnes?" Alistair's voice was soft, pulling her gently back to the present. He stood patiently, respecting her moment of reflection. Agnes turned, a genuine, radiant smile lighting up her face. "I don't know," she admitted, a thrill of possibility sparking within her. "And for the first time in a very long time, that doesn't terrify me. It excites me." She thought of the small cottage she still owned a few counties over, a quiet place near the beach she had always meant to spend more time in. She thought of the stacks of unread books, the half-finished knitting projects, the desire to simply wake up one morning and decide, purely on a whim, what the day would hold. No opening hours, no inventory checks, no demanding family members. "I imagine a quiet retreat for a while," she continued, articulating the nascent thoughts. "A chance to fully recover truly, to read, to walk on the beach, to perhaps even learn to paint. Something I've always wanted to do but never had the time for." She looked at Alistair. "And you? What are your plans for Agnes's curiosities?" Alistair's eyes lit up with a genuine enthusiasm Agnes recognized. "We will restore it to its former glory, and then some. I envision a true museum-quality experience, a place where people can truly appreciate the stories within these walls. We'll bring in new, curated collections, host special exhibitions, perhaps even a lecture series on the history of artifacts. The name, Agnes's Curiosities, will of course remain. It's integral to its charm. Agnes felt a surge of warmth. He truly understood. He wasn't just buying a building. He was adopting her dream, nurturing it, allowing it to grow beyond what she could have achieved alone. The legacy was safe. Her vision would live on, refined and elevated, under capable, respectful hands. "That sounds wonderful, Alistair," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I could have ever hoped for." "It was a sound investment, Agnes," he replied, a touch of gentle humor in his tone, "and a true pleasure to work with someone who understood the real value of what she possessed. Unlike others." His gaze flickered towards the street, where Leo and Clara's car would now be a distant speck. The thought of them, stripped of their assumed power, forced to confront the true consequences of their actions, brought a fresh wave of quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was about justice, about the quiet triumph of the underestimated. Agnes had always believed that integrity, though often tested, would ultimately prevail. And today, it had. She took a deep breath, the clean, fresh air of the street filling her lungs, devoid of the stale hospital scent, devoid of the unspoken resentments that had clung to her interactions with Leo and Clara. The sun, which had felt merciless hours ago, now felt like a warm, benevolent presence on her face. "Well," Agnes said, turning fully to Alistair, a newfound lightness in her step, "I suppose my work here is done, for now." She extended her hand, and Alistair clasped it firmly, his grip strong and reassuring. "Indeed, Agnes," he replied. "Go, rest, and paint your watercolors. I will ensure your legacy flourishes here." As Agnes walked back towards her pickup truck, the familiar rumble of its engine a comforting sound, she felt a quiet joy bloom in her heart. She had entered Main Street with trepidation, facing a confrontation she knew was coming, but had underestimated the sheer audacity of her nephew and his wife. She had left her shop with a feeling of profound relief, having severed ties that had long felt like chains. The past was now truly the past. The future, boundless and unwritten, stretched before her. And for the first time in a very long time, Agnes Harper was excited to discover what hidden curiosities it held for her. She looked in her rearview mirror one last time. The new proprietor, Alistair Finch, stood by the entrance to Agnes's Curiosities, a guardian of its future. And Agnes, for the first time, felt truly at peace. The drive from Willow Creek to her small cottage near the coast felt less like a retreat and more like an unfurling. Agnes, who had spent decades meticulously curating the lives of others through their discarded possessions, was now, for the first time in memory, curating her own. The familiar landscape blurred past her pickup truck's window, the orderly rows of citrus groves giving way to the wilder windswept palms and the distant glint of the ocean. Each mile was a physical manifestation of the emotional distance she was putting between herself and the recent turmoil. The sharp, metallic tang of the new padlock, the bitter taste of Leo and Clara's deceit, the lingering phantom ache from her illness, all of it began to recede with every turn of the wheel. Her cottage, nestled amidst a tangle of sea grapes and salt-tolerant flora, appeared like a welcoming haven. It was a modest structure, painted a cheerful robin's egg blue, with a wide, screened-in porch that faced the sunrise over the Atlantic. She'd bought it years ago, a spontaneous purchase fueled by a rare moment of whimsy, intending it as a weekend escape from the demands of the shop. But the weekends had been few and far between, always swallowed by new acquisitions, antique fairs, or the insistent pull of Agnes's Curiosities. Now, it was simply home. Stepping onto the cool tile of the porch, Agnes inhaled deeply. The air here was different, clean, briny, carrying the whisper of the sea. No dust of old paper, no faint scent of polish, no undercurrent of city exhaust. Just the pure, invigorating scent of freedom. Her body, still prone to occasional tremors from her recovery, felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The silence, broken only by the distant lull of the waves and the cry of gulls, was a balm to her overstimulated senses. For so long, her life had been a symphony of subtle cues, hidden meanings, and the constant hum of her own vigilance. Here, There was only peace. The first few days were a blur of rediscovery. She unpacked the few boxes she'd brought. Cherished photographs, a select handful of irreplaceable books, her favorite worn teacup, and Avia, small, exquisite porcelain doll that reminded her of her own childhood. Each item was placed with deliberate care, finding its new home in the sun-drenched rooms. There was no rush, no schedule, no external demands. She lingered over each decision, enjoying the simple act of choosing. The cottage wasn't filled with rare finds or priceless artifacts. It was filled with light, with air, and with the quiet promise of a life finally lived on her own terms. She spent hours on the screened porch, simply watching the shifting patterns of light and shadow, listening to the rhythm of the ocean. She started with small, tentative steps, walking down to the beach at sunrise, letting the cool, soft sand cushion her feet. The vastness of the ocean, stretching endlessly to the horizon, mirrored the newfound expansiveness in her own spirit. She wasn't confined by four walls of a shop, nor by the narrow expectations of others. She was simply Agnes, a woman on the cusp of a new adventure. One afternoon, rummaging through an old trunk in the small spare room, she unearthed a forgotten set of watercolors and a pad of thick, pristine paper. She had bought them years ago, inspired by a landscape painting she'd seen at an auction, but the demands of the shop had always pushed such leisurely pursuits to the periphery. Now, with nothing but time, she set them out on the small, sturdy wooden table on the porch. The colors, vibrant and inviting, seemed to hum with possibility. She dipped the brush into the water, watching the pigment bleed into the clear liquid, then touched it to the paper. The first strokes were awkward, hesitant, childish almost. But there was a profound joy in the act itself, in the uninhibited expression of color and form, unburdened by the need for perfection or profit. She painted sunsets that bled into the sea, palm trees swaying in the gentle breeze, the endless expanse of the sky. Most of them were terrible, she knew. But they were hers. The days flowed into weeks, marked not by appointments or deliveries, but by the ebb and flow of the tide, the changing phases of the moon, the arrival of migratory birds. She read until her eyes grew heavy, losing herself in stories that had no connection to her own life, a refreshing change from the constant analysis of narratives embedded in antiques. She learned to cook for one, simple, wholesome meals that nourished her body and soul. She rediscovered the simple pleasure of an afternoon nap, undisturbed, guilt-free. Her physical recovery continued, bolstered by the lack of stress and the constant infusion of fresh sea air. Her breathing deepened, her steps grew steadier, and the tremor in her hands, once a constant companion, receded to a mere memory. The weariness that had clung to her like a shroud for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, sustainable energy. She was healing, not just from the pneumonia, but from the cumulative weight of years of silent sacrifice and unspoken resentment. Occasionally, the outside world intruded. Her phone would buzz, a jarring reminder of the life she had left behind. Her assistant at the shop, a kind, earnest young man named Thomas, would call with updates from Alistair Finch. Thomas, who had always seen Agnes not just as his boss, but as a mentor, was thrilled with the new direction of Agnes's curiosities. He spoke of Alistair's vision, the meticulous restoration work, the plans for new exhibitions. The shop was thriving, not just financially, but artistically, spiritually. Agnes felt a deep satisfaction. Her legacy was truly in good hands. Then there were the calls from Kyle, her son, whom she hadn't spoken to in weeks. His calls were different now, tinged with a new, hesitant politeness. He wasn't demanding, wasn't talking about Emma's parents or his busy schedule. He asked how she was, truly. He asked about the cottage, about her walks on the beach. It was a tentative olive branch, a cautious attempt at reconciliation. Agnes answered his calls, spoke briefly, but kept her distance. The wounds were still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. She needed time, and so did he. She needed to see if his newfound concern was genuine, or merely a reaction to the seismic shift in her life. More rarely, her phone would show a blocked number, or an unscheduled text that went straight to her spam folder. She suspected these were attempts from Leo and Clara. She never engaged. Alistair had warned her they might try to appeal, to threaten, to beg. He had also informed her in a clipped professional tone that his auditors had indeed found significant irregularities in their accounting, and that legal proceedings were underway. Agnes felt no triumph, only a quiet confirmation of what she had always suspected. They had played a dangerous game, and now they were paying the price. Their attempts to contact her, she imagined, were born of desperation, not remorse. Her new life was a tapestry woven with threads of solitude and self-discovery. She reconnected with parts of herself she hadn't realized were missing. The witty, observational Agnes who loved a good mystery novel. The curious Agnes who spent hours identifying seashells and learning the names of coastal birds. The resilient Agnes who had faced down illness and betrayal, and emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. She was taking up space in the world, not just a small corner, but a vast, boundless expanse of her own choosing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, Agnes sat on her porch, a half-finished watercolor of a majestic pelican beside her. She picked up her phone, not to check for calls, but to look at a photo Alistair had sent her that morning. The newly restored facade of Agnes's Curiosities, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, its antique brass sign gleaming with renewed pride. It was beautiful, and it was no longer her burden. A profound sense of peace washed over her. She was not just healing, she was thriving. She was not just surviving, she was living. Her choices, drastic as they had seemed to others, had led her to this quiet, radiant freedom, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision. The twist had not just served justice, it had also liberated her, and the quiet respite, she knew, was just the beginning. The world was vast, and Agnes Harper, finally unburdened, was ready to explore every single one of its curiosities. As the weeks at the cottage stretched into months, Agnes found herself settling into a rhythm that felt both luxurious and utterly natural. The hurried pace of her former life, dictated by market trends, auction dates, and the relentless pursuit of hidden gems, had given way to a mindful existence. Her days unfolded with a quiet grace. Early morning walks on the beach, the cool sand cushioning her feet as she watched the sun paint the sky. Leisurely hours spent experimenting with watercolors, her crude renditions of seabirds and crashing waves bringing her immense, unadulterated joy. And evenings filled with the rustle of turning pages, deep dives into historical biographies or sprawling sagas that transported her far from the familiar. This was the Agnes she had always been, buried beneath layers of responsibility and the subtle erosion of self-neglect. She was rediscovering her own curiosities, not in dusty antique shops, but within the vast landscape of her own soul. Her physical health continued its steady upward trajectory. The lingering cough had vanished, her breath flowed freely, and her steps, once tentative, now held a confident stride. The sea air, she mused, was a far more potent tonic than any hospital medication. But it wasn't just the air, it was the absence of toxic energy, the release from the constant vigilance she had maintained over Leo and Clara. Their manipulative presence, a subtle but insidious drain on her vitality, had been excised, and in its place, a vibrant energy had begun to hum within her. Yet, complete isolation, even in paradise, was not Agnes's way. Her nature, forged in the crucible of countless human interactions over decades of buying and selling, yearned for connection. Tentatively, she began to explore her new surroundings. She discovered a small, independent bookstore in the nearby coastal town, its shelves crammed with new and used volumes, emanating the comforting scent of paper and possibility. The owner, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, recognized Agnes's quiet passion for literature, and soon they were exchanging recommendations, their conversations stretching beyond books to shared observations on life. She also found a local community center, offering a beginner's pottery class. The idea had bubbled up one morning, spurred by a sudden urge to work with her hands, to create something tangible and new, rather than simply preserving the old. The first attempts were disastrous. Lopsided mugs, collapsed bowls. But the feel of the clay, pliable and responsive beneath her fingertips, was deeply satisfying. It was a humble, grounding experience, a stark contrast to the cutthroat world of high-end antiques. In the class, she met disparate individuals, retirees, young artists, and hobbyists, united by the simple joy of creation. There was no pretense, no competition, just shared enthusiasm and the occasional burst of communal laughter over a particularly unfortunate piece. One Tuesday, after her pottery class, Agnes stopped at a local coffee shop, a sun-drenched space with mismatched furniture and the aroma of roasted beans. As she waited for her latte, she noticed a man sitting alone at a corner table, sketching intently in a large, leather-bound notebook. His hair was a distinguished silver, his hands strong and artistic, and his concentration absolute. There was something familiar about his quiet intensity, a focused energy that reminded her, oddly, of Alistair Finch. After a moment of hesitation, spurred by her newfound courage to step outside her comfort zone, Agnes walked over. "That looks fascinating," she said, her voice soft, not wanting to disturb his focus. The man looked up, his eyes, a surprisingly vibrant blue, twinkling with amusement. "Oh, forgive me, I get lost sometimes." He gestured to his sketch, a detailed rendition of the bustling coffee shop, every individual captured with a fleeting, telling gesture. "I'm a retired architect. Now I sketch life. Less demanding than blueprints, more satisfying." He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm Arthur Davies." "Agnes," she replied, offering her hand. "Agnes Harper. And your work is truly lovely." They talked for over an hour, about art, about life's unexpected turns, about the quiet joys of retirement. Arthur, it turned out, had moved to the coast a few years prior after losing his wife. He spoke of the challenge of starting over, of finding new routines, new passions. His words resonated deeply with Agnes, a fellow traveler on the path of reinvention. There was no pretense with Arthur, no hidden agendas, just an open, honest exchange of experiences. It was a connection she hadn't realized she longed for, a gentle companionship that felt easy and authentic. They exchanged numbers, promising to meet for coffee again. A new horizon indeed. Meanwhile, the ripples of Agnes's dramatic exit continued to spread back in Willow Creek. The news of the shop's sale had sent shockwaves through their small community. Agnes had been a fixture, a beloved character, and the sudden, unceremonious transfer of ownership, followed by Leo and Clara's equally unceremonious departure, became the topic of whispered conversations over coffee and murmured speculation in grocery store aisles. Leo and Clara, stripped of their assumed power and income, found themselves in a precarious position. The audit Alistair Finch had initiated had indeed uncovered significant financial mismanagement, not just irregularities, but outright theft. They had been skimming from the shop's profits, inflating expenses, and diverting funds into their own struggling personal accounts. The legal proceedings Alistair had threatened were now a grim reality. Agnes heard snippets of their downfall through Thomas, who called periodically to share updates, both on the shop's magnificent transformation under Alistair's guidance and the ongoing legal drama involving her nephew and his wife. Leo, desperate and panicked, had tried to contact Agnes numerous times, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails, attempting to paint himself as a victim, blaming Clara, blaming Agnes, blaming the world. Clara, more cunning, had attempted to rally support within their extended family, weaving a narrative of Agnes as a cruel, vengeful old woman who had unfairly ruined their lives. But Agnes remained unswayed. She listened to the voicemails, occasionally, a detached curiosity guiding her. There was no remorse in Leo's voice, only self-pity and a desperate plea for a way out. There was no true apology, only a panicked realization of consequences. And Clara's efforts at character assassination mostly fell flat. The community, while initially surprised, slowly came to understand the truth. Agnes had always been fair, generous to a fault, and fiercely independent. Her sudden, decisive action, once viewed as radical, now seemed like an act of necessary self-preservation. Many had witnessed Leo and Clara's increasingly arrogant demeanor, their thinly veiled contempt for Agnes, their blatant disregard for the shop's unique character. Justice, though sometimes slow, had a way of revealing itself. Agnes felt no schadenfreude, no desire to gloat. The pain they were experiencing, she knew, was a direct result of their own choices. She had simply removed herself from their destructive path. Her focus remained on her own journey, on the quiet joy of her new life. She harbored no bitterness, no consuming need for revenge. Those emotions, she understood, would only tether her to a past she was determined to leave behind. She was too busy learning to paint a wonky pelican, too absorbed in a captivating novel, too excited about the prospect of another long conversation with Arthur Davies, to dwell on the shadows of yesterday. The lingering echoes of Leo and Clara's downfall were just that, echoes, distant and fading, against the vibrant soundtrack of her new horizon. The easy companionship with Arthur Davies quickly blossomed into a cherished friendship. Their coffee shop meetups became a regular ritual, a quiet anchor in Agnes's otherwise free-flowing days. Arthur, with his keen artist's eye and gentle wit, proved to be an unexpected confidant. He spoke of his late wife, Eleanor, with a tender fondness that resonated deeply with Agnes's own memories of Harold. They found common ground in the quiet solace of shared grief and the invigorating challenge of rebuilding a life after loss. He encouraged her fledgling artistic endeavors, praising her bold use of color even as her pelicans stubbornly refused to look like anything more than abstract blobs. His encouragement was genuine, untainted by the competitiveness she had sometimes encountered in the antique world, or the thinly veiled judgment of Leo and Clara. One sunny afternoon, as they sat on Agnes's screened porch, the rhythmic crash of waves providing a soothing backdrop, Arthur brought up the topic of her old shop. "Thomas called me yesterday," he began, stirring his iced tea. Agnes had introduced them a few weeks prior. Knowing Arthur, with his architectural background, would appreciate Alistair Finch's meticulous restoration work. "He's absolutely enthralled with the progress Alistair is making. He says the place is transforming into something truly magnificent, a real gem for Willow Creek." Agnes smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her. "That's wonderful to hear. I knew Alistair was the right person." "He is," Arthur agreed, his gaze thoughtful. "Thomas also mentioned the unpleasantness with your nephew and his wife. He said it's gotten quite messy with the legal proceedings." Agnes's smile faltered slightly, a momentary cloud passing over the bright afternoon. "Yes, it seems they were far more ambitious with the shop's finances than I ever imagined." She paused, a sigh escaping her lips. "It's a shame, really. Leo was family." Arthur nodded slowly. "Family can be complicated. Sometimes, the ties that bind are the ones that strangle. But you, Agnes, you had the courage to cut them, cleanly." He looked at her, his blue eyes kind and understanding. "That takes immense strength, especially when you were vulnerable." Agnes looked out at the shimmering expanse of the ocean. I knew I couldn't let them destroy what I'd built. Not the shop and not my own peace of mind. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized how precious both were, and how quickly they could be taken from me if I didn't act." "And you acted decisively," Arthur affirmed. "Most people in your situation would have been consumed by anger, by a desire for revenge. But you just moved forward. That's rare." "I think," Agnes mused, tracing the rim of her glass, "that anger would have only kept me tethered to them, to their bitterness. And I was too tired for that. Too ready to just be free." She looked at Arthur, a question forming in her mind. "Have you ever had to cut ties like that, Arthur? With someone you once cared for?" Arthur's gaze softened, distant. "Not in such a dramatic fashion. But yes, there have been relationships, business and personal, that I've had to gently prune, shall we say. People whose presence, over time, began to diminish rather than enrich. It's never easy. There's always a period of guilt, of questioning if you could have done more. But ultimately, you learn that protecting your own energy, your own well-being, is not selfish, it's essential. His words resonated deeply with Agnes, echoing her own burgeoning understanding. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun warming their skin, the unspoken understanding a tangible presence between them. This friendship with Arthur was a revelation. He saw her, truly saw her, not as the owner of an antique shop, not as the recent invalid, not as the wronged matriarch, but simply as Agnes, a woman of depth, resilience, and quiet strength. The conversation naturally shifted to the future. Arthur spoke of his own plans: a long-postponed trip to Italy to sketch ancient ruins, a desire to volunteer at a local animal shelter. Agnes, emboldened by his adventurous spirit, began to voice some of her own nascent dreams. "I've always wanted to see the redwoods," she confessed, her voice filled with a childlike wonder, "and explore the Pacific Northwest, rent a cabin somewhere wild just for a while, see parts of the country I've only read about." Arthur's eyes lit up. The Pacific Northwest, a magnificent choice. The sheer scale of those trees, the rugged beauty of the coast, it's breathtaking. He leaned forward, a playful glint in his eye. "Perhaps, if you're ever in need of a traveling companion, and don't mind a quiet artist who carries a sketching pad everywhere." Agnes's heart fluttered, a sensation she hadn't experienced in decades. It wasn't a romantic overture, not yet, but a tender offer of shared adventure, a possibility of companionship on the journey of reinvention. "I might just take you up on that, Arthur," she said, a wide, genuine smile spreading across her face. The seeds of a new future, gentle and unexpected, were beginning to sprout. While Agnes was cultivating new friendships and contemplating redwood forests, the once bustling world of Leo and Clara was rapidly unraveling. The legal actions initiated by Alistair Finch's team proved relentless and unforgiving. The, quote, significant irregularities in the shop's ledgers were, in fact, undeniable proof of embezzlement. Leo, with his limited business acumen and desperate attempts to cover his tracks, was quickly outmatched by the sharp, methodical legal minds arrayed against them. Clara, whose cunning had been primarily focused on social maneuvering and subtle manipulation, found herself ill-equipped for the harsh realities of criminal investigation. The first blow was the loss of their home, acquired with an inflated mortgage and funded, in part, by the very shop profits they had siphoned. It became an early casualty in their rapidly escalating financial woes. Then came the public humiliation. News of the charges, leaked by a disgruntled former acquaintance of Clara's, spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. The whispers that had once been reserved for Agnes's unexpected disappearance now focused squarely on Leo and Clara's downfall. The very community they had tried to impress, to lord over, now regarded them with a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction. Leo, stripped of his perceived authority and his carefully cultivated image of success, descended into a spiral of self-pity and recrimination. He blamed Clara for pushing him into the more risky financial maneuvers, for her insatiable desire for status symbols. Clara in turn blamed Leo for his weakness, his inability to hide their illicit dealings, his utter failure to secure their future. Their once united front, built on ambition and mutual disdain for Agnes, fractured under the immense pressure, devolving into bitter, public arguments that became fresh fodder for the town's gossip mill. Agnes heard very little of this directly. Thomas, a meticulous and kind individual, would offer carefully worded updates when he called. He spoke of the sale of Leo's luxury car, the rumors of Clara seeking employment outside of her usual social circles, the general ignominy that had befallen them. But Agnes, fortified by her new life and the tranquility of the cottage, processed this information with a detached understanding. She felt no triumph, no surge of vindication. Their suffering was not her doing. It was the inevitable consequence of their own greed and contempt. She had merely removed herself from the blast radius. Her focus remained firmly on the unfolding beauty of her own life. The concept of being alone had transformed from a quiet fear into a cherished freedom. She explored deserted stretches of beach, discovering hidden tide pools teeming with life. She taught herself to identify constellations in the ink-black night sky, their distant light, a profound reminder of the vastness of the universe, and her own small yet significant place within it. The simple act of choosing what to have for dinner or which book to read, without consulting anyone else's preferences or schedules, felt like a constant, quiet rebellion against years of accommodating others. Yet a subtle shift was occurring within her. The initial need for solitude, for uninterrupted peace, was gradually beginning to yield to a gentle yearning for deeper connection. Her conversations with Arthur, initially light and exploratory, had begun to touch on more profound themes. They spoke of the nuances of regret, the resilience of the human spirit, the quiet courage it took to truly forgive, not just others, but oneself. Agnes found herself opening up, sharing fragments of her life she hadn't voiced in years, even to Harold. The unspoken pressures of maintaining Agnes's curiosities as her sole identity, the unspoken disappointments in her son's distant behavior, the plants, quiet moments of loneliness she had once felt even surrounded by people. These quiet vulnerabilities found a safe harbor in Arthur's empathic listening. One evening, as a gentle rain pattered against the roof of her porch, Agnes sat sketching by lamplight. It was a still life of shells she'd collected, their delicate forms a testament to nature's artistry. Her phone buzzed. It was Kyle. His calls, though more frequent, still held a note of awkwardness, a tentative uncertainty. But tonight, his voice was different. He sounded genuinely distressed. "Mom," he began, his voice strained. I heard about Leo and Clara. About the charges. It's worse than I thought." Agnes sighed softly. "I imagine it is, Kyle. Consequences often are." "But they're family," he stammered. "Doesn't that count for anything? Can't you do something? Speak to Alistair? Ask him to go easy?" Agnes closed her eyes for a moment, a wave of familiar weariness washing over her. The old Kyle. The one who still believed she was there to fix his problems, to smooth over unpleasant realities. "Kyle," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "my involvement in that situation ended the moment I sold the shop. Alistair Finch is a businessman, and he operates with integrity. What Leo and Clara did was illegal. That's a matter for the courts, not for me to interfere with." "But they said you did it out of spite," Kyle continued, his voice tinged with a familiar defensiveness. "That you ruined their lives because you were angry about the garage, about them taking over the shop." Agnes's grip tightened on the phone. The garage, the symbol of her ultimate dismissal. It was a distant memory now, almost overshadowed by the freedom she felt. But the sting of their words, twisting her actions into a tale of petty revenge, still carried a faint echo. "Kyle," she said, her voice gaining strength, "what I did was for myself. It was to protect my legacy, and more importantly, to protect my peace. They were stealing from me, both financially and emotionally. My decision to sell was not about spite. It was about self-preservation. And about ensuring that the shop, my life's work, went to someone who would cherish it, not exploit it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If they feel their lives are ruined, that is a consequence of their own actions, not mine." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the rhythmic patter of rain. Then Kyle's voice, softer, almost a whisper, reached her. I guess I understand. It's just a lot. Everything's different now." "Yes, Kyle," Agnes agreed, her voice softening slightly. "Everything is different, and sometimes different is exactly what's needed." She sensed a subtle shift in his tone, a nascent understanding that perhaps, this time, she wouldn't be drawn back into his drama. The office. Conversation eventually wound down, Kyle still uneasy but no longer demanding. Agnes hung up, a sense of quiet closure settling over her. She looked at her half-finished sketch, then at the watercolors beside it. The world was full of new possibilities, new colors, new forms waiting to be discovered. Her life, once meticulously ordered and predictable, now flowed with the exhilarating uncertainty of a vast, uncharted ocean. She wasn't looking back. She was too busy charting her own course, guided by the quiet compass of her own desires. The past was a fading echo, and the future, vibrant and inviting, beckoned. The rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore became Agnes's constant companion, a soothing soundtrack to her days of quiet rediscovery. She had found a comfortable routine at the cottage, a blend of solitary pursuits and gentle social engagement that nourished her spirit. Her pottery skills, while still far from masterful, brought a deep satisfaction, the raw clay yielding to her touch in ways that her nephew and his wife never had. Her watercolors, though still depicting abstract interpretations of the coastal landscape, bloomed with bolder colors, reflecting the vibrancy returning to her life. And with Arthur she found a kinship that felt both new and deeply familiar, a connection built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of life's complex tapestry. Yet, even in her idyllic solitude, the threads of her old life, particularly those tied to her son, Kyle, occasionally tugged. His calls had become more frequent, more earnest. He no longer spoke of Leo and Clara's troubles, seemingly having accepted that Agnes would not intervene. Instead, he started asking different questions. Questions about her life at the cottage, about her painting, about her newfound friendships. There was a tentative vulnerability in his voice, a hesitant attempt to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. Agnes listened, cautious, but not closed off. She sensed a genuine shift in his demeanor, a nascent desire to understand her not just as his mother, but as a person. One evening, as a fierce but brief tropical storm raged outside, rattling the windows of her cottage, Agnes's phone rang. It was Sarah, her granddaughter. Sarah's voice, usually bright and effervescent, was subdued, tinged with a raw emotional ache. "Grandma, can I come visit you?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, almost drowned out by the drumming rain. "Things here are not good." Agnes's heart immediately softened. Sarah had been the unexpected ally, the one person in Kyle's household who had truly seen Agnes's plight and spoken up. "Of course, sweetheart," Agnes said, her voice warm with genuine concern. "You are always welcome here. What's wrong?" "It's Mom and Dad," Sarah confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush, a dam breaking. "They're fighting all the time. About everything. About Leo and Clara. About money. About you. Mom says you ruined everything, that you're just being vindictive. Dad tries to defend you, but then he just gets quiet and goes to his study. The house feels cold, Grandma. It's like a battlefield." Agnes listened, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest within Kyle's home. She had known her actions would have repercussions, but hearing the raw pain in Sarah's voice, the burden her granddaughter was carrying, was a sharp ache. "Oh, sweetheart," Agnes murmured. "I'm so sorry you're caught in the middle of this." "I'm not caught in the middle," Sarah corrected, her voice firm despite the tremor. "I'm on your side. And I told them. Mom was wrong and Dad needed to stand up for himself. I told them what I thought about how they treated you." A profound wave of pride washed over Agnes, momentarily eclipsing the sadness. Sarah, at just 17, possessed a moral compass that many adults lacked. "You are so brave, my love," Agnes said, her voice thick with emotion. "You truly are." "Brave doesn't make things better, Grandma," Sarah replied, a touch of weary cynicism in her tone. "It just makes people angry. Mom called me disrespectful. Dad just looked lost." "Sometimes," Agnes said, her gaze drifting to the storm-lashed window, "doing the right thing, speaking your truth, makes others uncomfortable, especially those who prefer convenient lies. That's not your fault, Sarah. That's their journey to navigate." They talked for a long time, the rain outside eventually subsiding to a gentle drizzle. Sarah spoke of her frustration with her parents' inability to communicate, their superficiality, and her growing disillusionment with the life they had built. She confided in Agnes about her own dreams, plans for college far away, a desire to study something truly meaningful, not just what was expected of her. Agnes listened, offered quiet counsel, and, most importantly, simply heard her. She assured Sarah that her decision to sell the shop and move had nothing to do with Sarah, and that their bond was unbreakable, regardless of physical distance or family drama. "You're teaching me so much, Grandma," Sarah said softly before they hung up, "about being strong, about not letting people walk all over you, about choosing yourself. And you, my fierce girl, Agnes replied, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. You are teaching me that the future is in good hands. Sarah arrived 2 days later, pulling into Agnes's driveway in her small, slightly dented hatchback. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky scrubbed clean and the air sparkling with renewed clarity. As Sarah emerged from her car, her dark hair a wild tumble around her shoulders, Agnes saw not just her granddaughter, but a young woman on the cusp of truly understanding herself. There was a newfound seriousness in her eyes, a quiet strength that resonated deeply with Agnes's own journey. Their week together was a balm to Agnes's soul. They spent hours on the beach, walking in companionable silence, collecting shells, and sharing observations about the world. Sarah, unburdened by her parents' expectations, blossomed. She talked freely about her anxieties regarding college applications, her dreams of exploring distant lands, and her burgeoning interest in social justice. Agnes, in turn, shared stories of her youth, tales of her early days in the antique trade, and even the vulnerabilities she had once kept carefully hidden. She spoke of her quiet loneliness after Harold's death, the immense pressure of raising Kyle alone, and the sacrifices she had made without regret, but also without proper acknowledgement. One afternoon, as they painted together on the porch, Sarah with surprising talent, Agnes still delightfully abstract, Sarah broached the topic of her father. "Dad's really trying, Grandma," she said, her voice thoughtful. "He's calling me more, asking about my day, not just about school. He even went to therapy. Mom's still, Mom, but he's different." Agnes paused, her paintbrush hovering over her canvas. "I've noticed a change in his calls," she admitted. "He seems more present. He told me he had a long conversation with Alistair Finch," Sarah continued. "Alistair told him how much you valued the shop and how you ensured its legacy. He also told Dad that Leo and Clara had put the shop at serious financial risk and that your sale actually saved it from potential ruin." Agnes felt a quiet surprise. Alistair, ever discreet, had apparently chosen to share this vital piece of information with Kyle. It was a truth that reframed her actions not as vindictive, but as deeply protective. "I think," Sarah mused, dipping her brush in water, "he's starting to see it, Grandma. Not just that he messed up, but how he messed up. That it wasn't just about the garage or the shop, but about not truly seeing you, not valuing you as a whole person." A few days later, just before Sarah was due to leave, Kyle called. His voice was steady, calm, devoid of the defensiveness or desperation that had marked their previous conversations. "Mom," he began, "Sarah told me she's leaving tomorrow. I want to come pick her up, and I was hoping we could talk, just you and me, no agenda, just talk." Agnes hesitated for a moment. This was it, the moment she had waited for, cautiously hoped for. It wasn't a demand or a plea, it was an invitation, offered with humility. "I'd like that, Kyle," she replied, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Come for lunch, we can sit on the porch." When Kyle arrived the next day, the sea breeze ruffling his hair, Agnes saw a flicker of the young man she had raised. He hugged Sarah tightly, a genuine affection in his embrace. Then he turned to Agnes, his eyes searching hers. There was no practiced smile, no forced pleasantry, just a quiet uncertainty. Pression. They sat on the porch, the rhythmic lull of the waves filling the silence. Sarah, sensing the weight of the moment, discreetly retreated to her room. Kyle took a deep breath. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I've done a lot of thinking. About everything. About the garage, about the shop, about how I've treated you, and I'm so sorry, truly sorry." His gaze met hers, and Agnes saw genuine remorse reflected in his eyes, not just guilt or fear of consequences. "I never meant to make you feel like an obligation, like you didn't matter, but my actions, they spoke louder than any words I thought I felt. I took you for granted, Mom, for years. I let Emma's influence overshadow my own judgment. I became so focused on success, on appearances, that I lost sight of what truly mattered. I lost sight of you, And in doing so, I think I lost a part of myself." Agnes listened, her heart aching with a familiar maternal pain, but also with a profound sense of release. This was the conversation she had longed for, the apology that held the weight of true self-reflection. "Thank you, Kyle," she said softly. "That means a great deal. It's not enough, I know," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want to do better. I want to know you, Mom. The real you. Not just the mother who took care of me, but the woman with dreams and talents and stories. I want to build a real relationship with you, not out of obligation, but because I want you in my life. And I want Sarah to see what a genuine, respectful family looks like, even if it's messy sometimes." Agnes reached across the small table and gently took his hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of professional life, but his grip was tentative, vulnerable. "It's a start, Kyle," she said, her voice filled with a quiet hope. "A very good start." She saw the raw honesty in his eyes, the dawning realization of the depth of his neglect. It wasn't about the shop anymore, or the garage, or Leo and Clara. It was about them. About a mother and son finding their way back to each other, not through superficial pleasantries, but through hard-won truth. The bitterness, the resentment, the quiet hurt she had carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by the warmth of renewed connection. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, Agnes felt the fragile seed of reconciliation begin to sprout. She had sold her shop, she had left the chaos, and in doing so, she had created the space for something far more valuable to grow. The true healing, she realized, had only just begun. The lunch with Kyle at the cottage had been a turning point, not a miraculous cure-all, but a genuine beginning. After years of strained politeness and unspoken resentments, the raw honesty shared on her sun-drenched porch felt like a cleansing rain. It didn't erase the past, but it watered the ground for a different kind of future. Kyle began visiting more regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sarah, who would greet her grandmother with an uninhibited joy that warmed Agnes's heart more than any antique ever could. He asked about her painting, her pottery, even her obscure historical books, listening with an attentiveness Agnes hadn't seen since his childhood. He spoke, with increasing vulnerability, of his own struggles to redefine success beyond billable hours and societal expectations, of his efforts to mend his strained relationship with Emma, and of his quiet determination to be a better father to Sarah. Agnes, in turn, offered guidance born of experience, but always with the understanding that this was his journey, not hers to direct. The tentative shoots of reconciliation were growing, slowly but steadily, nourished by mutual effort and respect. Her relationship with Arthur Davies also deepened, weaving itself seamlessly into the fabric of her new life. Their coffee shop debates expanded to long walks along the beach, where Arthur would sketch the shifting sands and Agnes would collect unusual shells, their conversations flowing effortlessly from art to philosophy, from shared memories of loss to hopeful plans for the future. He became a steadfast presence, a gentle anchor, whose quiet understanding and genuine warmth filled a space Agnes hadn't realized was empty. One crisp autumn morning, as the Florida air hinted at the cooler months to come, Arthur arrived at her cottage with a travel brochure. "Agnes," he began, his blue eyes twinkling, "you mentioned wanting to see the Pacific Northwest, the Redwoods, the Oregon coast. I've been doing some research. There's an art retreat, a sketching workshop actually, for a week, in a remote cabin near Crater Lake, followed by a few days exploring the coast. It sounds like something you might enjoy, and if you don't mind a quiet companion." Agnes felt a thrill of excitement she hadn't experienced in decades. A real adventure, not just a mental one. A journey into the wild, untamed beauty she had only dreamt of. And with Arthur, whose calm presence felt increasingly indispensable. "Arthur," she said, a wide smile spreading across her face, "I don't mind a quiet companion at all. In fact, I'd be delighted." The preparations for the trip were a joyous affair, a stark contrast to the fraught packing and purging she had done when leaving Willow Creek. This time she was packing for discovery, for experience, not for escape. Kyle, when she told him, reacted with genuine enthusiasm. "Mom, that's incredible. You absolutely deserve this. Send me pictures of those giant trees. And if you need anything at all for the trip, don't hesitate to ask. His support felt genuine, a testament to the growth that had already taken root in their fragile reconciliation. As Agnes embraced these new horizons, the lingering shadows of her past began to fade into obscurity. The legal saga involving Leo and Clara finally reached its painful, inevitable conclusion. Thomas, in one of his weekly updates, delivered the news with a tone of quiet relief. The auditors had uncovered undeniable proof of systemic embezzlement, far beyond initial estimates. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the mounting legal costs, Leo and Clara had ultimately entered plea bargains, admitting to their financial crimes. They avoided prison time, but were sentenced to significant restitution, community service, and were permanently disbarred from holding any positions of financial trust. They had lost everything: their home, their dwindling savings, their social standing, and any remaining illusions of their own importance. They had been forced to leave Willow Creek, their names now synonymous with scandal, their ambition having consumed them whole. Agnes listened to Thomas's summary, her heart feeling neither triumph nor pity. Just a deep, quiet sense of finality. They were no longer her burden, no longer a source of pain or preoccupation. They were a closed chapter, a harsh but necessary lesson in the true cost of disrespect and greed. Her life, untethered from their toxicity, felt lighter, freer. She wished them no ill will, but she harbored no desire for reconnection. Her focus was on the vibrant tapestry of her present and the exciting blank canvas of her future. The transformation of Agnes's curiosities under Alistair Finch's careful stewardship was nothing short of miraculous. Thomas, now proudly working as Alistair's assistant curator, sent Agnes photographs that brought tears to her eyes. The shop, renamed the Finch Collection at Agnes's Curiosities, retained its beloved name, while being elevated to a new level of prestige. The dusty, overflowing shelves had been replaced with carefully curated displays, each antique piece illuminated to highlight its unique beauty and history. They had installed climate-controlled display cases for the more delicate items, a small, elegant research library for scholars, and a charming cafe where patrons could enjoy artisan coffee amidst centuries-old artifacts. Alistair had honored his promise, preserving the soul of the shop while transforming it into a cultural landmark, a testament to history and enduring beauty. Agnes felt a profound sense of peace, knowing her legacy was not just intact, but flourishing beyond her wildest dreams. It wasn't just a shop anymore. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of stories, of enduring craftsmanship, and of the quiet, discerning eye she had cultivated over a lifetime. She had built something truly special, and it was now in the hands of someone who understood its worth, someone who would carry its story forward. This realization brought a deeper sense of contentment than any personal possession ever could. Her worth, she now understood, was not defined by ownership, but by the love and dedication she had poured into her passions and the courage she had found to protect them. Her new home, the little blue cottage, became a sanctuary of quiet contentment. She had hung her best watercolors on the walls, their amateurish beauty, a constant reminder of her newfound freedom, and the joy of creation for its own sake. Her pottery, misshapen but imbued with her spirit, sat on windowsills, catching the sunlight. She cultivated a small herb garden, its fragrant leaves filling the air with the scent of life and growth. This was her space, truly her own, filled with objects that held meaning not for their monetary value but for the memories they held and the new paths they represented. One evening, as a spectacular sunset painted the sky in fiery hues, Agnes sat on her porch swing, a cup of herbal tea warming her hands. Arthur was due to arrive any minute. They were planning the final itinerary for their Pacific Northwest adventure. Her phone buzzed. It was Kyle. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice warm and clear. "Just calling to say hi. Thinking about you? Sarah and I were talking about that pottery class you mentioned. She thinks it sounds fun. Maybe we could try it together sometime?" Agnes smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that very much, Kyle," she said. "I'd like that very much." She hung up, a profound sense of gratitude welling within her. Her life, once clouded by expectation and obligation, was now vibrant with authentic connection. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, had opened the door to richer, more meaningful relationships. The journey had been difficult, fraught with pain and difficult decisions, but it had led her to this quiet, radiant freedom. She had found her roots in a new place, planted them firmly, and now, she felt her wings unfurl, ready to soar into whatever adventures the future held. The past was a story she had bravely written, and the future was a canvas, vast and inviting, waiting for her bold new colors. The journey to the Pacific Northwest was everything Agnes had imagined, and more. The world, once confined to the familiar contours of Willow Creek and the quiet solitude of her coastal cottage, unfurled before her in a breathtaking tapestry of emerald forests, mist-shrouded mountains, and a wild, untamed coastline. Arthur proved to be the quintessential travel companion, observant, insightful, and always ready with a dry witticism or a poignant observation. He navigated the winding mountain roads with easy confidence, sketched incessantly in his leather-bound notebook, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of local flora and fauna that never ceased to fascinate Agnes. Their first stop was the redwood forest, an experience that transcended mere sightseeing. Standing beneath those ancient giants, their colossal trunks reaching skyward seemed to stretch time itself, humbling Agnes with their enduring presence. She felt tiny, insignificant, yet profoundly connected to something vast and eternal. Arthur set up his easel, capturing the interplay of light and shadow on the furrowed bark, while Agnes, for once, abandoned her watercolors in favor of simply sitting, breathing, and absorbing the awe-inspiring silence. It was a silence broken only by the whispers of the wind through the highest branches, a symphony older than memory. She thought of her shop, her own collection of ancient objects, and realized these trees were the ultimate antiques, living relics of a time she could only imagine. The experience solidified a deep, quiet reverence within her, a reminder of the planet's enduring majesty, indifferent to human squabbles and ambitions. From the towering forests, they ventured to the rugged Oregon coast. Here, the landscape shifted dramatically, giving way to dramatic cliffs, crashing waves, and stretches of black volcanic sand. They explored tide pools teeming with iridescent anemones and scuttling crabs, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the moody, gray skies. Agnes found immense joy in the simple act of walking along the deserted beaches, the roar of the ocean a powerful, cleansing force. She collected smooth, sea-worn pebbles, each one a tiny testament to countless years of resilience against the relentless waves. Arthur, ever the artist, was captivated by the dramatic light, filling pages of his sketchbook with the tempestuous beauty of the Pacific. There was a raw, honest energy to this place that resonated with Agnes's own journey of shedding pretense and embracing authenticity. The week at the art retreat near Crater Lake was a revelation. Surrounded by fellow artists, of varying skill levels and backgrounds, Agnes felt a joyous liberation. She painted with a fearlessness she hadn't known she possessed, her brushstrokes becoming bolder, more confident, capturing the sapphire intensity of the lake and the rugged peaks surrounding it. She still wasn't a master, but she was an artist, creating for the sheer pleasure of it, unburdened by judgment or expectation. Arthur, a natural mentor, offered gentle critiques and enthusiastic encouragement, his belief in her budding talent a powerful motivator. Their shared passion for art, for beauty, for the simple act of seeing the world with fresh eyes, deepened their bond further. During one particularly vibrant sunset over the lake, as the sky bled from fiery orange to soft violet, Arthur turned to her, his blue eyes reflecting the changing light. "Agnes," he said, his voice soft, "this journey, these past few months, they've been truly remarkable. You've blossomed. And he paused, his gaze steady. "I find myself profoundly grateful to be here, sharing it with you." Agnes's heart swelled. The unspoken affection, the quiet understanding, needed no elaborate declarations. It was a feeling of profound connection, a deep, resonant harmony she hadn't known was possible after Harold. This wasn't a sudden, passionate romance, but something far more enduring, a partnership of souls, grounded in respect, shared experience, and a mutual appreciation for life's quieter joys. While Agnes explored the vastness of the American West, back in Florida, her own family continued their slow, often painful process of growth. Kyle, maintaining his commitment, called regularly, not just to check in, but to share genuine updates on his life, his work, and his own ongoing efforts at self-reflection. He told her about starting therapy, about painful but necessary conversations with Emma regarding their communication issues, and about his deliberate efforts to be more present for Sarah. Sarah, in turn, continued to flourish. She found her voice in school, excelling in a debate club, and had decided to pursue a rigorous liberal arts program at a university far from home, a decision Agnes strongly supported. She was becoming the fierce, independent young woman Agnes had always hoped she would be, embodying the lessons of self-respect and courage Agnes had implicitly taught her. Emma's transformation was slower, more grudging. The shock of Leo and Clara's downfall, combined with Kyle's newfound assertiveness and Sarah's unwavering support for Agnes, had forced her to confront her own role in their family dynamics. While never truly apologetic in the way Kyle had been, Emma had, over time, adopted a more cautious, less condescending tone in her interactions with Agnes. She had even, on occasion, asked about Agnes's travels, a small but significant gesture of genuine interest. It was not a perfect reconciliation, but it was progress, a tentative stepping back from the sharp edges of past conflict. Agnes understood that some relationships might never reach the depth of authenticity she now shared with Kyle and Sarah, and that was okay. She held no resentment, only a quiet acceptance. Her focus remained on nourishing the relationships that truly enriched her life. Upon their return to Florida, rejuvenated and inspired, Agnes and Arthur settled back into their coastal rhythm, now with the added layer of shared adventure. They continued their art classes, now with an even greater enthusiasm, their sketches filled with new landscapes and the vibrancy of their shared memories. They hosted quiet dinners at Agnes's cottage, inviting old friends from her pottery class or the bookstore, expanding her circle of authentic connections. Life was full, rich, and deeply satisfying. One sunny afternoon, Alistair Finch called, his voice brimming with excitement. "Agnes," he exclaimed, "you simply must come see the shop. We're launching the Living Legacy exhibition next month, featuring a selection of pieces that were originally part of your collection, alongside artifacts from local historical families. And we've commissioned a series of portraits of people who embody the spirit of Willow Creek's history. We'd be honored if you'd allow us to include you. Your story, your contributions, they are central to the shop's enduring appeal." Agnes felt a profound swell of emotion. Her shop, her legacy, not just preserved, but celebrated. And she, the woman they had once tried to erase, would be honored as a living part of its history. She accepted, of course, a quiet pride blooming within her. The exhibition opening was a joyous affair. The Finch collection at Agnes's Curiosities gleamed, a true marvel of thoughtful restoration and elegant display. The air hummed with hushed conversations and admiring murmurs. As Agnes stood before her portrait, rendered with remarkable sensitivity by a local artist, she felt a wave of profound gratitude. The painting captured her not as the weary antique dealer or the fragile invalid, but as the woman she had become, resolute, serene, with eyes that held the wisdom of a life well lived and the spark of enduring curiosity. Kyle and Sarah were there, their faces beaming with pride. Kyle, no longer the distracted lawyer, engaged Alistair in a genuine conversation about the shop's historical significance, a clear testament to his growth. Sarah, tall and radiant, embraced Agnes fiercely. "Grandma," she whispered, "you look incredible. This is amazing, your legacy." Later that evening, back at the cottage, as the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, Agnes sat on the porch with Arthur. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" she mused, reflecting on the day. "How everything turned out." Arthur reached for her hand, his fingers warm and comforting. "It's not luck, Agnes. It's the consequence of courage. You chose yourself. You refused to be diminished. And in doing so, you found a new path, not just for your shop, but for your life." Agnes looked out at the familiar, boundless ocean, her heart filled with a quiet, profound peace. She thought of the changed locks, the initial sting of betrayal, the long, arduous road to recovery. She had faced down illness, deceit, and the pain of family estrangement. But through it all, she had held onto her self-worth, her dignity, and her unwavering belief in a future defined by her own choices. She had built a life, lost a piece of it, and then, with courage and grace, had built an even better one. Her journey was a testament to the enduring power of resilience, the quiet strength found in knowing one's worth, and the liberating truth that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for others, is to choose a path of radical authenticity. Agnes Harper, at 72, had finally found her true home, not in a building but within herself. And with boundless possibilities stretching before her, she knew with absolute certainty that her greatest adventure had only just begun. The final chapter was far from written. It was just starting to unfurl, as limitless and captivating as the ocean before her. Agnes's life, once a meticulously arranged collection of others' stories, had finally become her own masterpiece. The Pacific Northwest adventure with Arthur was not just a trip. It was a profound testament to her renewed spirit, proving that life, even in its later chapters, held boundless opportunities for joy and discovery. They explored glaciers, hiked through ancient forests, and shared quiet moments of profound connection, solidifying a bond built on shared laughter, deep respect, and a mutual appreciation for life's vast beauty. Arthur, with his steady presence and gentle understanding, became a cherished cornerstone in her new world. Back in her coastal cottage, Agnes continued to cultivate her passions. Her watercolors grew bolder, her pottery more confident, each piece a tangible expression of her inner freedom. Kyle's calls became genuinely warm exchanges, filled with updates on his own journey of self-discovery, and his increasingly authentic relationship with Sarah. He was becoming the man she had always hoped he'd be, not out of obligation, but out of a deep-seated desire for genuine connection. Sarah, now thriving at university, continued to be Agnes's fiercest champion and dearest confidant, her bright spirit a constant source of pride. The echoes of Leo and Clara's downfall eventually faded entirely, becoming a distant cautionary tale that no longer held any power over Agnes's peace. Their absence was not a void, but an opening for richer, more meaningful relationships to flourish. And the Finch collection at Agnes's Curiosities in Willow Creek, her beloved shop, stood as a vibrant testament to her enduring legacy. It wasn't just a business. It was a living museum, a place where history was honored, stories were shared, and new memories were made. Agnes's decision, once perceived as an act of radical defiance, was now recognized as an act of profound wisdom and foresight. Agnes, now well into her 70s, was no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had bravely chosen to gain. She was a woman who had faced adversity head-on, who had reclaimed her dignity, and who had learned that true happiness wasn't found in clinging to the familiar, but in daring to embrace the unknown. Her life was a testament to the powerful truth that it is never too late to rewrite your own story, to find new purpose, and to discover the boundless joys of living authentically. With the ocean's endless rhythm as her backdrop and the promise of new adventures on every horizon, Agnes Harper knew, with absolute certainty, that her greatest curiosities were still waiting to be discovered. Agnes's life at the Blue Cottage settled into a rhythm of profound contentment, a testament to the power of deliberate choice. Her mornings often began with Arthur, a shared cup of coffee on the screened porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky over the Atlantic. They discussed their latest art projects, his intricate charcoal sketches now incorporating the coastal wildlife, her watercolors growing bolder, finding new confidence in abstract expression. The conversation would then drift, as it often did, to books, to history, to the quiet observations that made up the rich tapestry of their days. Their friendship, a gentle, unwavering presence, brought a warmth to Agnes's life she hadn't known she was missing. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a deeper, more enduring companionship built on shared values and mutual respect. They were two seasoned travelers, finally navigating life's later stages, with a trusted, kindred spirit by their side. The Pacific Northwest adventure had truly unlocked something within Agnes. She found herself poring over maps, researching remote cabins in Montana, sketching out itineraries for drives along the California coast. The vastness of the American landscape now felt like an invitation, not a distant dream. She often thought of the giant redwoods, their ancient presence a constant reminder of enduring strength and silent wisdom. That trip had been more than just sightseeing. It was a profound affirmation of her decision to reclaim her life. Every breath of crisp mountain air, every roar of the Pacific waves, had whispered that she was exactly where she was meant to be, living a life of authentic joy. The familial landscape continued its gradual, often subtle, evolution. Kyle's commitment to self-improvement proved steadfast. He continued therapy, delving into the deeper roots of his drive for external validation and his tendency to take those closest to him for granted. His calls to Agnes became less about checking in and more about genuine connection, sharing insights from his own journey, asking for her unique perspective on life's complexities. He'd visit the cottage more frequently, sometimes bringing Sarah, sometimes just for a quiet afternoon of conversation, a shared meal, and the simple comfort of being in his mother's peaceful presence. He spoke, with a new humility, about his ongoing efforts to improve his marriage with Emma, acknowledging that true partnership required vulnerability and shared effort. Agnes, seeing his sincere efforts, offered encouragement, recognizing that genuine change was a long, arduous process, but one well worth undertaking. Sarah, a shining beacon of independence, was thriving at her chosen university, miles away from the domestic tensions that had once clouded her youth. She was majoring in environmental science, her passion for protecting the natural world a direct reflection of her fierce, moral compass. Her calls to Agnes were filled with enthusiastic updates on her studies, her new friends, and her growing activism. Agnes cherished these conversations, recognizing the intelligent, empathetic young woman Sarah had become. Their bond, forged in the crucible of difficult truths, was stronger than ever, a testament to love unburdened by expectation or obligation. Even Emma, though never fully shedding her carefully constructed facade, seemed to have undergone a subtle shift. The public humiliation and legal consequences faced by Leo and Clara, coupled with Kyle's changed demeanor and Sarah's unwavering stance, had forced Emma to confront certain realities. Her interactions with Agnes, while still occasionally stiff, were now devoid of the cutting remarks or thinly veiled condescension of the past. There was a cautious respect, a tacit acknowledgement that Agnes had, against all odds, emerged not just intact, but triumphant. It wasn't a deep friendship, but a functional peace, a testament to the boundaries Agnes had so firmly established. And back in Willow Creek, the Finch collection at Agnes's Curiosities continued to flourish, a vibrant hub of history and culture. Alistair Finch, a true connoisseur, nurtured the shop with meticulous care, hosting renowned scholars and curated exhibitions that drew visitors from far beyond the town's borders. Agnes's decision to sell to him was now widely lauded as an act of brilliant foresight, preserving a local treasure that might otherwise have been stripped of its soul. Thomas, her former assistant, now Alistair's trusted right hand, occasionally sent her updates, filled with pride in the shop's continued success and the respectful preservation of its unique character. Her legacy, she realized, was not just intact, it was thriving, celebrated, and deeply appreciated. Agnes often thought about the pivotal moment, standing outside her locked shop, feeling the cold metal of the new padlock, the bitter sting of her family's disregard. It had been a moment of profound vulnerability, yet also a moment of immense clarity. That day she had chosen herself. She had chosen dignity over complacency, courage over comfort, and truth over the convenient lies that had quietly eroded her spirit for years. And in making that choice, she had not just changed her own life, but had set off a ripple effect that had, unexpectedly, spurred growth and change in the lives of those around her. Her conversations with Arthur became richer, infused with the wisdom gleaned from their shared journeys. They often spoke of legacy, not just in terms of what one leaves behind, but in how one lives. Agnes realized that her most profound legacy wasn't just the shop or the family she had raised, but the example she now set, an embodiment of resilience, self-respect, and the courage to redefine happiness on one's own terms. She was a woman who had, literally and figuratively, taken back the keys to her own life. The future remained unwritten, a vast and inviting landscape. There would be more travels with Arthur, more watercolors painted on distant shores, more quiet mornings spent in her sun-drenched cottage. There would be continued conversations with Kyle, witnessing his ongoing transformation, and joyous visits from Sarah, whose burgeoning independence filled Agnes with immense pride. There might even be quiet, respectful acknowledgments from Emma, small gestures that spoke of a grudging peace. Agnes, now fully vibrant and deeply contented, understood that true liberation wasn't about escaping problems, but about embracing her own power to navigate them. The echoes of past hurts had faded, replaced by the symphony of a life lived authentically, with purpose and joy. She had learned that boundaries were not walls, but foundations upon which healthier relationships could be built. She had faced her fears, owned her choices, and emerged, not just whole, but more fully herself than she had ever been. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues over the Atlantic, Agnes sat on her porch, a warm mug in her hands, Arthur sketching quietly beside her. The scent of the sea filled the air, mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of the herbs from her garden. Life was an unfolding mystery, a collection of endless curiosities. And Agnes Harper, finally unburdened, finally free, was ready for every single one of them. Her greatest adventure was simply being herself, charting her own course, one beautiful unwritten day at a time. The quiet hum of contentment was her ultimate legacy. The seasons at the little blue cottage continued their gentle cycle, mirroring the enduring harmony Agnes had cultivated within her own life. The vibrant greens of spring foliage gave way to the sun-drenched vibrancy of summer, then the muted golds and russets of autumn, before settling into the crisp, quiet beauty of winter. Each passing season brought new joys, new lessons, and a deeper appreciation for the boundless freedom she now commanded. Her mornings with Arthur remained a sacred ritual, their conversations growing richer with the easy intimacy of long-standing companionship. They spoke of everything and nothing, from the philosophical debates sparked by a newly read book, to the simple pleasure of watching a pod of dolphins arc through the waves offshore. Arthur's quiet presence was a balm, a mirror reflecting her own serene contentment. Their travels became a cherished chapter in their shared story. After the Pacific Northwest, they ventured to the southwestern deserts, mesmerized by the vast, open spaces and the dramatic hues of the canyons. Agnes sketched the ancient rock formations, their layered history a powerful metaphor for her own journey of discovery. Arthur, ever observant, captured the subtle shifts of light that brought the desolate landscape to life. These were not mere vacations, they were expeditions into the soul of the land and of themselves. They learned to navigate unknown territories, to embrace spontaneity, and to find beauty in the unexpected. Each journey reinforced Agnes's belief that life, even in its later chapters, held an infinite capacity for wonder. Back in Willow Creek, the transformation initiated by Agnes's decisive action continued to blossom. The Finch collection at Agnes's Curiosities thrived under Alistair's expert guidance, becoming a celebrated cultural landmark. Its meticulously curated exhibitions drew visitors from across the state, and the serene ambiance invited hours of contemplative browse. Agnes often received invitations to private viewings and lectures, attending with a quiet pride, seeing her life's work not just preserved, but elevated. She even found herself offering occasional informal advice to Alistair and Thomas, her decades of intuitive knowledge, a valuable asset to their refined vision. The shop was no longer a burden, but a source of shared joy and a testament to the power of a legacy honored. Kyle's commitment to personal growth proved steadfast. He continued his therapy, bravely confronting the ingrained patterns of his past. His interactions with Agnes became truly reciprocal, marked by genuine curiosity, vulnerability, and mutual respect. He started visiting the cottage on his own, not just to pick up Sarah, but to spend quality time with his mother, sharing insights from his work, discussing his evolving perspective on life, and simply enjoying her company. He spoke with a new honesty about his marriage to Emma, acknowledging the challenges but expressing a genuine desire to build a more authentic partnership. Agnes listened without judgment, offering support and wisdom, but always allowing him the space to navigate his own path. Sarah, a vibrant force of nature, continued to flourish at university. Her studies in environmental science ignited a fierce passion for advocacy, and she immersed herself in campus activism, her voice becoming a powerful instrument for change. Her regular calls to Agnes were filled with spirited debates about global issues, enthusiastic updates on her projects, and heartfelt expressions of love and gratitude. Sarah often credited Agnes as her inspiration, her courage to choose herself a guiding light for her granddaughter's own journey of independence. Their bond, once tested, now stood as an unbreakable testament to the power of honesty and unconditional love. Even Emma, though never fully shedding her carefully constructed persona, softened around the edges. The stark reality of Leo and Clara's downfall, combined with Kyle's profound personal transformation and Sarah's unwavering moral compass, forced her into a quiet introspection. Her interactions with Agnes gained a measure of genuine warmth, a subtle acknowledgement of Agnes's strength and resilience. The contentious relationship had evolved into a respectful, albeit somewhat distant, cordiality. Agnes understood that some bonds were inherently complex, and she accepted the peace they had found, choosing not to dwell on past grievances. Agnes often reflected on the dramatic pivot her life had taken, sparked by the simple, brazen act of a changed lock. It had been a moment of profound vulnerability, yet it had ignited a strength she hadn't realized lay dormant within her. She had chosen to take back her agency, not with anger or spite, but with a quiet, resolute determination. And in doing so, she had not only reclaimed her own happiness, but had set off a ripple effect that had, in unexpected ways, encouraged growth and healing in her fractured family. Her days at the cottage were a testament to a life fully lived. On her own terms, she continued to paint, to read, to walk the beaches, and to explore the world with Arthur by her side. Her hands, once accustomed to the meticulous restoration of antiques, now shaped clay, tended a vibrant garden, and found solace in the simple beauty of creation. She had discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in possessions or profits, but in the richness of experiences, the depth of connections, and the boundless freedom of an unburdened spirit. Agnes, now in her mid-70s, carried her years with grace, her eyes sparkling with wisdom and a quiet joy. She was a living testament to the powerful truth that endings could be magnificent new beginnings, and that the greatest adventures often awaited those brave enough to redefine their own narratives. Her life was no longer a story to be curated by others, but a vibrant, ever-unfolding masterpiece, each new day a blank page waiting for her bold, confident strokes. The journey had been long, marked by trials and triumphs, but it had led her to a profound, enduring harmony. And for Agnes Harper, the unwritten epilogue was the most exciting chapter of all. Agnes's mid-70s brought with them a profound sense of peace and a deeper understanding of the ripple effects of her choices. The very act of reclaiming her life had created a cascade of changes, not just for herself, but for those intertwined with her story. The old shop in Willow Creek, now the Finch Collection at Agnes's Curiosities, continued its flourishing journey. Alistair would often send her meticulously bound catalogs of new acquisitions and invitations to exclusive preview events. Agnes, sometimes with Arthur by her side, would attend these, enjoying the hushed reverence of the patrons and the quiet satisfaction of seeing her legacy so thoughtfully honored. She was a respected figure, a living legend within the antiquarian world, no longer burdened by its daily demands, but celebrated for her discerning eye and pioneering spirit. One crisp autumn day, while sifting through old photographs at the cottage, Agnes found a faded snapshot of Leo and Clara from years ago, before ambition had hardened their faces. A faint pang, not of anger, but of wistfulness, touched her. She sometimes heard echoes of their lives through the Willow Creek grapevine, how they had moved to a smaller town, attempting to rebuild their lives in obscurity, forever marked by the scandal. It was a stark reminder of the path not taken, a testament to the corrosive power of greed and disrespect. Agnes felt no triumph in their misfortune, only a quiet reaffirmation of her own choices. Her peace wasn't contingent on their suffering, but on her own liberation. The fabric of Agnes's family life had been rewoven, stronger and more authentic than before. Kyle had truly committed to his personal transformation. He'd not only continued therapy, but had taken on a more mindful approach to his successful law career, delegating more, prioritizing presence over endless hours. His calls to Agnes were filled with genuine updates on his growing satisfaction, his new focus on pro bono work, and the deeper connection he was forging with Emma. Their marriage, once strained by superficiality, was finding a new foundation built on mutual effort and vulnerability. He'd even picked up sketching, inspired by Agnes and Arthur, often sending her photos of his surprisingly decent landscape attempts. Their relationship had evolved into a beautiful, adult friendship, built on honest communication and unconditional love. Sarah continued to be a beacon of Agnes's influence. Thriving at university, she spent her summers working on environmental projects, embodying the fierce integrity Agnes had always instilled. Their conversations, often spanning hours, delved into complex global issues, ethical dilemmas, and Sarah's own dreams of making a tangible difference in the world. Sarah viewed Agnes not just as a grandmother, but as a living example of strength, resilience, and the courage to live authentically. She visited the cottage whenever her busy schedule allowed, bringing a vibrant energy that filled the rooms with laughter and spirited debate. Even Emma, in her own way, had softened. The undeniable changes in Kyle, and Sarah's unwavering admiration for Agnes, had chipped away at her polished exterior. While their relationship would never be one of deep intimacy, a quiet respect had settled between them. Emma sometimes called Agnes, not for obligation, but to share small details about her garden, or ask for advice on a local charity project. It was a testament to the enduring power of boundaries and the quiet ripple of positive change. Agnes's mid-70s were not a time for slowing down, but for deepening. Her mornings with Arthur, her artistic pursuits, her continued exploration of the world, each day was a precious gift, unwrapped with mindful gratitude. Her coastal cottage, once a weekend escape, was now a sanctuary, filled with the warmth of genuine connection and the quiet hum of profound contentment. The salt-laced air carried the scent of possibility, and the endless horizon of the Atlantic mirrored the limitless expanse of her own future. She had faced down illness, betrayal, and the painful process of dismantling a life that no longer served her. She had built anew, not from obligation, but from a profound understanding of her own worth and desires. Her life was a testament to the extraordinary power of choice, the courage to embrace change, and the enduring strength found in living authentically. She was a woman who had, against all odds, charted her own course, and in doing so had inspired those around her to seek their own truths. Agnes Harper, with Arthur by her side, her family thriving in their newfound authenticity, looked towards the horizon. The unwritten chapters stretched before her, vast and inviting. There were more quiet moments to savor, more landscapes to explore, more wisdom to glean. Her greatest adventure, she knew, was simply being herself, every single remarkable day. The years at the little blue cottage continued to unfold, with a grace and serenity Agnes had once thought unattainable. Each season brought its own unique blessings. Spring burst forth with an explosion of color in her meticulously tended garden, mirroring the vibrancy that now characterized her days. Summer invited long, languid afternoons on the screened porch. The scent of salt water carried on the gentle sea breeze, as she and Arthur lost themselves in books, or simply watched the distant ships on the horizon. Autumn painted the world in fiery hues during their drives through the changing foliage further inland, a stunning contrast to the perpetual green of her coastal haven. And winter, with its crisp air and quiet introspection, became a time for reflection, for deepening artistic pursuits, and for the comforting warmth of shared companionship. Agnes had found her rhythm, a beautiful dance between cherished routines and spontaneous adventures. Her mornings began with meditation, a practice she'd adopted after her illness, grounding her in the present moment. Her watercolors continued to evolve, transitioning from literal landscapes to more abstract expressions of emotion and light, a testament to her ever-growing inner world. She found immense joy in the pottery studio, her hands now confidently shaping clay into elegant, functional pieces that adorned her cottage and found homes with friends. This creative life, unburdened by commercial pressure, was a constant source of fulfillment, a stark contrast to the relentless demands of her past. The garden of Agnes's relationships, once overgrown with weeds of resentment and neglect, now flourished under the warmth of genuine connection. Kyle's transformation was remarkable. He had fully embraced a life of purpose beyond profit, channeling his sharp legal mind into advocating for environmental causes, inspired, he openly admitted, by Agnes's fearless embrace of authenticity and Sarah's unwavering ideals. His visits to the cottage were frequent, filled with laughter, deep conversations about life's complexities, and a newfound ease that spoke volumes of their healed bond. He looked younger, lighter, shedding the invisible burden of a life lived for others' expectations. His marriage with Emma had found a stable, respectful footing, built on honest communication and a shared commitment to their family's well-being. Sarah, now graduated from university and embarking on her own impactful career in environmental policy, remained a brilliant, loving presence in Agnes's life. Their bond was a testament to the power of truth and mutual admiration. Sarah regularly called for advice, shared her triumphs and challenges, and frequently visited the cottage, bringing her vibrant energy and a fresh perspective that delighted Agnes and Arthur. She was living proof that choosing oneself could also inspire generations. Even Emma, in her own quiet way, had softened. The sharp edges of her ambition had dulled, replaced by a more nuanced understanding of life's true value. While their relationship would never possess the profound depth Agnes shared with Kyle and Sarah, it had evolved into one of respectful cordiality. Emma occasionally sought Agnes's advice on home projects or local community initiatives, a testament to a grudging yet genuine appreciation for Agnes's wisdom and strength. The story of Agnes's Curiosities, now the Finch collection at Agnes's Curiosities, had become an integral part of Willow Creek's identity. Under Alistair Finch's meticulous stewardship, the shop had blossomed into a nationally recognized cultural institution. Its exhibitions drew visitors from around the globe, and its curated collection was celebrated for its historical significance and artistic integrity. Agnes occasionally lent pieces from her private collection at the cottage for special displays, her eye for forgotten treasures still as keen as ever. She was revered as the shop's founder, her resilience and unique vision celebrated in every article and documentary about the establishment. Her legacy, she knew, was not just intact, it was thriving, honored, and woven into the very fabric of the community she had once thought to leave behind completely. Agnes, in her golden years, felt a profound sense of completeness. She had faced down illness, navigated betrayal, and consciously dismantled a life that no longer served her, all to build something infinitely more meaningful. She had learned that true independence wasn't about being alone, but about making choices that honored her own soul, even if those choices were difficult and misunderstood by others. Her story was a living testament to the power of self-worth, the courage to embrace change, and the boundless potential of a life lived authentically. She had cultivated a garden of peace within herself, radiating outward to touch every relationship and experience. As she sat on her porch swing, a gentle breeze rustling the palm fronds, Arthur's hand resting lightly on hers, Agnes looked out at the endless horizon. The sun dipped below the ocean, painting the sky in hues that begged to be captured on canvas. Her life, once fraught with unspoken burdens, was now a masterpiece of her own making, rich with genuine connection, vibrant creativity, and an unwavering sense of purpose. She had found her deepest curiosities, not in dusty antique shops, but within the boundless depths of her own spirit. The unwritten years stretched before her, each day a new opportunity for discovery, a new stroke on the canvas of her extraordinary self-authored life.